Paul Joseph Watson is an author and the editor-at-large of Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Paul, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hi, Dave. Good to be here.
I'm glad you are here. When we were talking before we started, you were saying that I'm gonna get some hate for this. Are you warning me of pre-hate?
I think you've probably already got some hate just for announcing that I'm going to be on. I mean, there's a lot of people who have some kind of butthurt over, Infowars and Alex Jones. They think it's, just conspiracy central. But most people don't realize that, Alex is not this big main controlling force that is like dictating what everybody says. He pretty much gives me free rein to talk about whatever I want. And that's what's good about Infowars. It's a very broad church. So you've got, numerous writers, commentators who work with Infowars, and they can basically talk about and write about whatever they want. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the best job imaginable. So I think people need to get over it and move on, because the issues that we're talking about supersede any perception about what Infowars is about, what people think it's about. So, I just want people to listen to what I've got to say and concentrate on the issues rather than what website it's hosted on. That's irrelevant at the end of the day.
Right, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, I just sent one tweet out this morning saying that you were coming on the show, and immediately, conspiracy theorist, he works with Alex Jones. And it's like, you guys are having conspiracy theories about the conspiracy theory. So I was like, let's just talk it out, and we'll see what happens, right?
No, it's not as bad as it used to be. I mean, I know there's this perception out there that, Infowars is discredited or whatever, but I mean, we're breaking stuff every day. We're linked on the Drudge Report. We've got 20 million listeners a week now for the radio show. So whether you like us or not, we're a presence, and that's why some people have a problem with it. But as I said, just concentrate on the issues of what I'm saying. And in fact, my YouTube channel explores these kind of issues off on a tangent from the normal content that Infowars would cover. So I've kind of attracted a new satellite audience outside of Infowars. So it's all about bringing new people in, and that's what I've attempted to do. That's where I think I've been successful recently. Yeah,
and it's your YouTube channel that actually got me familiar with what you were doing, because you did a phenomenal video on the regressive left, which everyone knows I'm not a fan of them. You've done some really interesting stuff about the European immigration crisis. So yeah, we're gonna get into all the issues stuff. But just to wrap up the Infowars part of this, how did you get involved with Infowars? What's your relationship like with Alex? Let's go down that route for a little bit.
Well, I mean, I started my own political website when I was about 18 years old. So, I would go home and host a radio show on dial-up internet to 3 people, to 3 listeners, back in the early 2000s. So that was the very genesis of it. Alex liked what he was doing. He liked the content I was covering. So he basically headhunted me and said, come and edit Infowars, come and write for us. And that's what happened. So now I'm based in London. They're based in Austin, Texas. So I'm up, 6 hours ahead of time, so I can get a jump on the news. That's always beneficial with a news organization.
Sure.
So that's why it kind of works. And he lets me write and say what I want. He's not this controlling presence. And, a lot of people think that Alex Jones is a kind of act that it's put on, this radio personality that he has. But if you meet him and you hang around with him, what you see is what you get. That's Alex Jones. He's like that all the time. It's not an act. He's not putting it on. In private, in person, he's kind of more jovial and fun than his rants on the radio would suggest. But that's him. That's his personality. It's not an act.
Yeah, I'm curious, were you trepidatious to join forces with him? Because obviously it was a good opportunity. It's saying that it's worked for you. But because of what I said before about I just send one tweet out and people start yelling at me, you must have had some level of concern, right?
Well, that was a long time ago back in the day. So really, Alex was only a few years into his operation.
Sure.
I mean, I built up a good deal of traffic with my own website. So there was no trepidation. It was just about reaching a wider audience. So obviously, I jumped at the opportunity.
Yeah. So where do you actually consider yourself politically? I think I have a good sense, and one of the things we've been talking about here is sort of this new growing center, people who really want to stand up for free speech and civil liberties, but also understand that we have real threats and that this immigration issue in Europe is a big problem. They want to be able to honestly talk about Islamism. So the old dynamic of right, left, Democrat, conservative for us in the States, it all seems to be crumbling. So I'm curious, what do you even consider yourself if you had to go with a label?
Well, I grew up, obviously, when I was a teenager, I was a progressive. I think it was Winston Churchill that said, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative when you get older, you have no brain. Right. So at the moment, in my 30s, I would consider myself mainly a libertarian. Maybe you could call me a conservatarian, but it's somewhere within that gap between the two. So that's basically where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Do you find that movement growing where you are? Because I do sense it's growing here. Our politics have gotten so crazy between a democratic socialist who's the hot guy on the left and Trump, who's sort of off the rails but confused. Is he really a Republican? Does he really stand for conservative values, or is he truly a centrist? None of it makes sense anymore. Are you guys getting some of that feeling too?
To some extent, yeah. But I mean, in the UK, it's still extremely left-wing. I mean, even the Tory party isn't classically conservative. They're somewhat left on a lot of issues. So most people don't even know what a libertarian is in the UK, to be honest. Only people who are really politically active will know what that actually means. So I think America is streets ahead in the sense of actually understanding that there is a political alternative outside of progressivism, which is still what dominates the entire discourse in the UK. I mean, people will think you're racist or a bigot if you're not a progressive, especially as a young person.
Yeah.
So the circles in which I move, there's very little understanding about what these labels even mean, which is why I try to concentrate on the issues without, coming at it from a left or right persuasion.
Yeah, and that's very much what I've tried to do, and I've tried to define a lot of these terms. And, the whole libertarian ideology, it really fits with me, you know what I mean? Like, do with your body what you want, let the government stay out of your life for the most part, and build a life that works for you. But you're saying that the idea of that is really gone in the UK now?
I don't think it was ever here, really. I don't think people came to grips with it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still some debate within libertarian circles about certain issues like abortion or like open borders. I mean, some libertarians think that to be truly classically libertarian, you have to advocate open borders. Other people say, well, no, that's the government foisting open borders upon the people, taking their tax money to pay for it. But I mean, within the UK, as far as I'm concerned, in my experience, these labels aren't even known. They're not even defined. So when you describe yourself as a libertarian, people have no frame of reference. So they think if you're not a liberal, then you must be on some obscure fringe of the political spectrum. But, I guess the understanding is growing, especially with the backlash against social justice warriors, which has really accelerated in the past 18 months. So now these issues are beginning to be brought to the fore. Now people are beginning to understand that libertarianism is a backlash against authoritarianism, which of course is embodied by this feminist, third wave feminist social justice warrior movement.
Yeah, you're hitting all the buzzwords there. So do you think it's really like just a branding issue for libertarians? Because there's sort of no unifying principle that's bringing us together other than do what you'd like and don't harm someone. So they just need sort of better, there aren't good reps, basically, or at least from what I see in the United States. We have a couple, Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico, who had on the show, and he's running for president, but it's hard to gain traction when you're one of the outsiders.
Yeah, I think the problem with libertarianism is they're not on the frontier of political discourse. So when you get major issues that crop up in the news media, obviously, as somebody who's politically active, you have to seize upon them and tell your story and try and change that narrative as best you see fit. But libertarians tend to get stuck in the weeds. They're always arguing with each other about these minutiae issues, and they're not really on the frontier of the cultural discourse, which is more, now the domain of conservatarians and people who oppose social justice warriors. So I think in America, the libertarian movement is still so stuck in the weeds and arguing, minutiae between themselves that they're not really a robust force as they could be. I think that's one region in which they could improve by, hijacking these key issues, these core issues like the migrant crisis, and they're not doing that. They're debating with each other over, what minarchism is and whether we should have no government or limited government, and they have speeches and 3-hour YouTube conversations about that, and they're not really reaching anyone outside their inner circle. So I think that's how libertarianism needs to improve in that way.
Right. So I guess the silver lining to all of this is that because of the social justice warrior thing, and now we can get into some of these issues, is they're starting to push people into this idea of libertarianism, which is nice. So let's go to the social justice warrior stuff. You are not a fan of the social justice warrior movement, to put it mildly. When did you wake up to it? When did you really see it as a threat to free speech?
I think it was probably mid-2014. I mean, I was mainly covering geopolitical issues back in 2012, 2013. I was mainly on, the Syrian civil war, the build-up, the arms race, the confrontation with Russia over the course of 2013 to 2014. And then I became more active on Twitter, and it's only when you become active on Twitter and you have to actually put some time into it and follow the discourse that's taking place on Twitter that you realize that these issues are important, because it's no longer just, demented 14-year-olds on Tumblr expressing their bizarre, arcane grievances. These people are in the universities. They are our future thought leaders. They're being coddled. They're being protected by professors at these major universities. So it was that connection between realizing that this is not just idiots with an opinion on Twitter, which is completely obscure. This is now a really robust driving narrative amongst millennials, and that's once you realize how it's infested the core of the education system in America and now in Britain as well. That to me really symbolized how important it was to oppose these people, because they oppose everything I stand for, within the tenets of libertarianism itself.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had very similar, probably around the same time, awakening about this, because it was a lot on Twitter, right? Because you're seeing this stuff on Twitter and you see the stuff from Tumblr that makes its way over and all these people fighting about this stuff. Then we hear about the trigger warnings and the safe spaces and all of this stuff. But I could never really figure out how much of this just existed for people behind computers. But basically what you're saying is that this has been a long time coming, and that's what sort of has seeped into the university space, right?
Right, and now it's becoming really physical. I mean, you've seen the Bernie Sanders people, and we're going to get into the whole Trump thing later. But we've sent our reporters out to Wisconsin this past week, for example. And, it's not just Bernie Sanders supporters, it's leftists in general. They're the most vile, hateful people you could ever wish to meet. I mean, the sheer hatred that they give you, that radiates from their eyes when you so much as disagree with them, is palpable. And now they're out there, they're shutting down these private functions, these Donald Trump events, which, whether you agree with Trump or not, that's not your free speech First Amendment right to shut down a private function. You're impinging on other people's First Amendment by doing that. And these people wave signs saying, oppose hatred, oppose bigotry. They're the most hateful people you could imagine. So that's what I see now, the translation from Twitter. Now they're getting out on the streets. Of course, we've seen that with Black Lives Matter. That metastasized into a similar hateful, violent movement, and we might get into that later. But yeah, it's manifesting physically now, and it's why people are worried about civil unrest and riots, quite frankly, because these people are prone to violence and they're very hateful people.
So, okay, so we're going to get into all of that. So, but you hit on a lot of things there. So one of the things that I've been saying is I can't believe we're at a place in 2016 in America where I fear that it will be us ourselves, the citizens, who will take away our right to free speech more than the government. So in other words, it's not a First Amendment issue in these people protests because it's not the government doing it, but we do have a certain social contract that you have to let people speak and then you can use your speech to counteract it. But basically you're saying by blocking roads and by stopping people from speaking, that's where it becomes a free speech issue, not necessarily a First Amendment issue, right? You see that distinction?
No, I've got no problem with people being out on the streets protesting. I mean, that's their right. It's when they actually go into Donald Trump events in private buildings where they've paid to hire this building and they get the event in Chicago canceled, for example. That's impinging on other people's rights to peaceably assemble, exercise their First Amendment, and just listen to somebody's speech. But I mean, as you touched on before, it's this whole idea of, you know, before the power was in the media, and we're going to talk about the media later, now it's kind of divested back into the hands of people. It's people power, but it's people power gone mad. So now you have organized groups of people who go out to publicly shame others, to get them fired, to censor content from the internet. And that's how Twitter, in one sense, empowered the people, but it gave that power to these perpetually outraged mobs. And that's what woke me up to the social justice warrior issue. Because as you said, the concern for me a few years ago was the state, the government impinging on our free speech rights. Now it's perpetually professionally outraged mobs impinging on our free speech rights. I think that's the bigger danger right now in 2016 in comparison to anything that the state's going to do.
I completely agree. It's so ironic. I can't even think of an example right now in America where the state is holding the First Amendment hostage. I can't find one instance where you can't say whatever you want about the government or about government officials or anything like that. But I can see many instances where the mob and the online mob, and they'll try to stop your Patreon funding if you're a YouTuber, or they'll try to figure out other ways to have you fired or shamed or whatever else. Do you think that these people, like for example, when Trump was doing the rally in Arizona and they blocked the road in Arizona, do you think that they thought that they were helping their cause? Because I get it that not all of these people are thinking all their moves through properly, and they're going, we're going to stop them from showing up, and that's all good. But to me, all they really do is strengthen Trump, because then, look, nobody that didn't get there is suddenly not going to vote for Trump. It makes them want to vote for Trump more, and everyone watching it on the news is going, wow, who's being oppressed here? It's actually Trump. So it's fascinating, right?
No, I mean, I don't know if they've got any idea of how ridiculous they look, but they've got this media narrative backing them up, which is that Trump is inciting violence. And this is something that I've been hot on. Again, I don't agree with Trump on everything. I'm not a vehement Trump supporter. But if you go on Twitter on any single day and search for assassinate Trump or kill Trump, you will find hundreds and hundreds of examples. And obviously, most people don't mean it. They're not going to do anything. But they're threatening to assassinate Trump. And yet the whole media narrative is about how Trump supporters are violent, about how Trump himself is inciting violence. There's a rap video on YouTube right now. And we complain about, Twitter censoring conservatives for having the wrong political opinion. Mm-hmm. There's a guy who's still on Twitter. His account hasn't been touched by the Trust and Safety Council. He's got a YouTube video which calls for caving Trump's head in with a shovel, shooting him with an AK-47, filling him full of bullets. It's not even age restricted on YouTube. I mean, I've had videos age restricted for swear words.
Right.
Then the media came out afterwards, and this is a rap video out of, I think it's out of Baltimore, and Billboard.com celebrated it as, quote, a powerful protest song. This is a group of young men in a rap video threatening to kill Donald Trump. Imagine if, the Oregon militia or whoever had come out with a video threatening to assassinate Hillary Clinton. Do you think the media would be celebrating it as a powerful protest song? So it's that double standard. They're given left media cover because we've got this narrative that Trump's inciting violence, when again, they're the most hateful, violent people out there.